The very first course that I took at the beginning of my studies in psychology was child play therapy. And due to a scheduling mix-up on my first registration, I ended up showing up late to the class. I walked in and the classroom was full of peers, my same age, and other priests, and they were all on the floor, playing with cars on like one of those little road maps. There were two guys who were shooting each other with dart guns, and I thought to myself, like, I think I'm going to do okay. I think this program will be a little easier than I expected. They're very intentional about placing this course at the beginning of the program for a number of reasons. One, because it kind of illustrates what can be so helpful about the therapeutic process in general, for adults in talk therapy, for children in play therapy, but also because it, as a Christian Catholic university, play therapy is a great analogy for the way in which God desires to relate to us. So play therapy begins the same every session, where the therapist will say to the child, "This is a special place. Here you can say anything you want, and you can do almost anything, and if there's something you can't do, I'll let you know." As you hear that, how do you imagine most children respond? They freeze. Most children don't know what to do when there isn't an expectation placed on them. This is so common, and it sort of happens organically in our families and at schools and elsewhere, where children, they know the rules. They know the rules at mom and dad's house, they know the rules at grandma's house, they know the rules at school, they know what's expected of them, and they often work very, very hard to make sure that they are meeting those expectations. And it's very disorienting for a lot of children to have this kind of invitation to just be free, to be spontaneous, to let what they're feeling inside of them come out, and it won't be met with judgment. It's a place where if a child is feeling sad, those feelings are okay, and they can come out. If a child is feeling aggressive, which is so often not tolerated in so many other places in a child's life, that can come out, that can be okay. Not without restriction. If there is something, a boundary that is approached, that can be navigated. There's a limit that can be set, and the child can learn how to self-regulate. So I offer this because it comes up when I hear this gospel of the prodigal son. It reminds me so much of this is God's disposition towards us. That he is not starting with this list of rules. Like, you've come into my room, you've come into my church, here are the rules. Follow these. Make sure that you don't step out of line. And yet so often, that is how we experience him. That's how we experience the church. It's sort of like a program of sin management, where we follow the rules, we do the best we can, and we feel badly because we're not doing it that greatly, and we feel a kind of disconnect from God, feel even a sense of unworthiness. And that is so not the heart of God the Father towards us. We have this beautiful image in the Gospel of the two sons. And I think they capture very well the response that we can have to this kind of experiencing God as a set of rules. On the one hand, the younger son is sort of given up. It's too hard. It's too much. I can't handle these rules. I'm tired of living under this oppressive feeling of God, and I push him away. I grasp. I'm going to take care of my own needs. Take all of the possessions that I can and go off and just do my own thing. And perhaps there are moments in our lives where we've noticed that in ourselves, where we have sort of distanced ourselves from God and just sort of say, well, you know what? I can't handle all those obligations. It's too much. I'm just going to look after my own needs. And then there's the older brother, the older son. And his experience is no better. He even says it explicitly to his father that he feels a slave to his father, that he slaved under him all these years. He experiences this just oppressive set of rules, and then he never experiences God's goodness. And so he can become resentful and even jealous. Bishop Bryan, in his reflection on this passage, points out that when the younger son gathers all the possessions, our translation says he goes to a distant country. In the Greek, it refers more specifically to an empty space. He goes to a vast, empty space. I think it's a very powerful image of where we end up when we experience God in this way. Both sons, I would say, are living in that place of emptiness because they do not know the heart of their Father, who deeply loves them and desires to be in relationship with them. When I was in seminary, the Mass at the Abbey Mission begins at 6:30 in the morning, which I think we can all agree is far too early. I don't think even God is awake at that time. And there was more than one occasion when I would sleep through my alarm, hear the bells ringing, before Mass, and I'd be racing to the church to get there, just before Mass began, to make it on time, to meet the criteria. And I remember thinking, I will be glad when I am out of the seminary and not running late to Mass ever again. Well, God has a sense of humor, and I am teaching at the seminary, and I often spend the night up there. And recently, I slept through my alarm, I heard the bells ringing, and I was running to church, this time to celebrate Mass, and I thought to myself, this is just so embarrassing. Here I am again. In our Gospel, the Father is clearly looking for his younger son. He's been deeply grieved by his absence, by his leaving the Father's home. And he sees him while he's still at a distance, still far off. And he doesn't wait for him. He doesn't have a kind of protocol that the son is going to have to follow to return to him. He runs to him. He runs to his younger son. In Jesus' time, there's a saying that roughly that an older man, an elder, his robes should never rustle. They should never flow. The sense that an older man has a dignity, and it's undignified for him to run. But the Father casts all that aside. There was no expectation or kind of specific protocol that he was going to insist that his son follow in order to be returned into the home. He runs to him. He runs to him and he embraces him. And it's very striking to me as well that when he meets his son, he doesn't ask him where he's been, what he's done, where the money has gone. The Father is not insistent on getting the whole story, this kind of excruciating account of everything the son has done wrong. In fact, the son has prepared a speech, and the Father cuts him off partway through and restores him to relationship. It's such a powerful image of the heart of God the Father towards each of us. That wherever we find ourselves, if we identify more with the younger son or the older son, or we just feel God at a distance, we're reminded today in this powerful way that the Father's true heart towards us is that of a desire for relationship. And often we can experience the church and our relationship in a different way. We can experience the sacrament of confession in a different way, where it feels like this checklist that we have to go through this kind of excruciating protocol to then be right with God. And that is not who God is. So during this season of Lent, especially this Laetare Sunday, where we're reminded of the joy that we have of being in relationship with God, let us heed this message. Let us respond. Perhaps it's to return to confession after some time. Perhaps it's to return in a different way, trusting more in that love that God the Father has for us than in having to do this formula correctly. Let us approach him at this Mass and hear him say these words to each of us, his beloved sons, his beloved daughters, that you are always with me, and all I have is yours.